Hello and welcome to Raj tutorial. Today's English class is for class 10th, a footprint without feet book, lesson number 1, page number 3. So we will begin with second half of the story. At the surgery, the household dogs searched round me. Tricky looked down at the noisy pack with dull eyes, and when put down, lay motionless on the carpet. The other dogs, after sniffing round him for a few seconds, decided he was an uninteresting object and ignored him. So, here Tricky stays at the hospital. Who took him to the hospital? James Harriet. So James Harriet took him to the hospital. Here Tricky laid motionless on the bed that the vet made for him, okay, on the first day. And he was put on the bed. When he was put on that bed, he was motionless, he was listless, he had no energy to move. So other dogs came and engulfed him. They thought that new dog would be playing with them, but they soon found that it was an uninteresting object and went from there. I made up a bed for him in a warm loose box next to the one where the other dogs slept. For 2 days, I kept an eye on him, giving him no food but plenty of water. So, doctor fed him only water for 2 days, okay, almost 2 days. At the end of the second day, he started to show some interest in his surroundings, and on the third day, he began to whimper when he heard the dogs in the yard. So, doctor did not give him food for 2 days. Almost 2 days, he fed only water. So, the doctor found a little change in him. On the second, at the end of the second day, he started showing interest in his surroundings, and the third day he started whimpering, means to make soft cry, okay, low weak cry, when he heard other dogs in the yard. When I opened the door, Tricky trotted out and was immediately engulfed by Joe the greyhound and his friends. So on the third day, he came out of the door, out of the room, and he was surrounded by other dogs. One of the dogs' name is Joe. He is greyhound and his friends. After rolling him over and thoroughly inspecting him, the dogs moved off down the garden. Tricky followed him, rolling slightly with his surplus fat. So, and now he trotted, whimpered, and then he joined the hound, okay, in the garden. Okay. Now you can see there is a little change in the dog. Later that day, I was present at feeding time. I watched till Tristan slopped the food into the bowls. There was unusual headlong rush followed by the sounds of high-speed eating. Every dog knew that if he fell behind the others, he was liable to have some competition for the last part of his meal. So next day, okay, next same third day or which day? Okay, yeah, third day in the evening when the dogs were fed, all the dogs rushed towards the serving plate, serving dish where the food was served to them. Okay, and because they knew that if any dog was left behind, he had to struggle or have some competition with other to get the meal. When they had finished, Tricky two sorry for the interruption. Sorry. When they had finished, Tricky took a walk round the shining bowls, licking casually inside one or two of them. Next day, an extra bowl was put out for him, and I was pleased to see him jostling his way towards it. So, first day he didn't get the food because all of the dogs were active than him. Okay, but he understood that he had to also be active, he also had to rush, otherwise he would be starving without food. So next day he too ran, okay, he too ran, and he made his way, jostling his way means he pushed each other dogs and made his way towards the bowl. From then on, his progress was rapid. He had no medicinal treatment for any kind, but all day he ran about with dogs, joining in their friendly scrimmages. He discovered the joys of being bowled over, tramped on, and squashed every few minutes. He became an accepted member of the gang, and an unlikely, silky little object among the shaggy crew. Other dogs were shaggy. This dog was had silky body, okay, but now he was comfortable with the group. He's running, playing, and he's tramped on by them, okay. So fighting like a tiger for a shear at meal times and hunting rats in the old hen house at night. He had never had such a time in his life. So now his recovery was speeding up, okay. He had started running all day long and found joy in being bowled over and squashed in spite of being a, you can say, in spite of being an high maintenance dog, he had fitted in well, okay, with the gang of shabby and unkempt ones. Unkempt means uncombed. He had got silky body, but other they had got shaggy body, okay. It was a shaggy crew all the while. So now you would might be confused with scrimmages means rough, okay, or confused struggle, you can say. Hmm? Jostling means to push round, to push uh, roughly against somebody in the crowd. Now, next stanza. All the while, Mrs. Pumphrey hovered anxiously in the background, ringing a dozen times a day for the latest bulletins. I dodged the questions about whether his cushions were being turned regularly or his correct coat worn according to the weather, but I was able to tell her that the little fellow was out of danger and convulsing rapidly. Convalescing means um, recovering from the illness, okay. So this Pumphrey's concern was also true because she loved her dog very much. So Mrs. Pumphrey used to phone the vet's clinic several times a day. She was keen to record the recovery and maintenance at the short intervals. Got it, children? So James brushed away her questions about Tricky's dressing and about whether he was wearing according to weather or not, what he ate, what he did not. But he didn't fail to assure her that Tricky was out of danger. Where we were? She started to bring round fresh eggs, 2 dozen at a time, to build up Tricky's strength. For a happy period, my partner and I had 2 eggs each for breakfast. But when the bottles of wine began to arrive, the real possibility of the situation began to dawn on the household. Now, see, this mother, she is like a mother for Tricky, huh? She could not resist herself from bringing extra food for Tricky. Therefore, she started bringing eggs for Tricky. But did he give? Did Wet give to the dog? No. But instead they ate by their own. They ate themselves. Okay. So all these additional things were eaten by Mr. Harriet and his companion. Okay. So let us see what happened then. It was to enrich Tricky's blood. Lunch became a ceremonial occasion with 2 glasses of wine before and several during the meal. So Mr. Harriet and his companion, they started having lavish food. Okay, it was like a ceremonial occasion for them to have wines, 2 glasses of wine before and after. After the meal, they had several glasses of wine. We could hardly believe it when the oh, please wait. Let the page open. Yeah. So we could hardly believe it when the brandy came to put a final edge on Tricky's constitution. Now, another thing was added to the feast, that was brandy. Okay, so for a few nights, the fine spirit was rolled around, inhaled, and reverently drunk. So, with great respect, they drank brandy also. Who? Mr. Harriet and his companion. Okay, where is it? It was a temptation to keep Tricky on as a permanent guest. But I knew Mrs. Pumphrey was suffering, and after a fortnight, felt compelled to phone and tell her that the little dog had recovered and was awaiting collection. So Mr. Harriet thought, first he thought that they should keep Tricky as a permanent guest because they could enjoy those feast, lot of brandy, eggs, and what else, wine. But he knew that Mrs. Pumphrey would be suffering, might be missing her dog. Therefore, after after 15 days, he called Mrs. Pumphrey and asked her to take the dog. Within minutes, about 30 feet of gleaming black metal drew up outside the surgery. So, after 30 minutes, after the 30 minutes of the call, they found who at the gate? Mrs. Pumphrey. The chauffeur opened the gate, and I could just make out the figure of Mrs. Pumphrey almost lost in the interior. So she rushed inside the clinic. Her hands were tightly clasped in front of her. Her lips trembled. Oh, Mr. Harriet, do tell me the truth. Is he really better? She is so much anxious to know about her dog. Okay, she was concerned about his well-being and wanted to be sure about it. Okay, yes, he's fine. There is no need for you to get out of the car. I will go and fetch him. I walked through the house into the garden. A mass of dogs was hurtling round and round the lawn, and in their midst, ears flapping, tail waving, was a little golden figure of Tricky. So he was playing with all those dogs in the garden. In 2 weeks, he had been transformed into a lithe, hard muscled animal. He was keeping up well with the pack. Pack means a group of dogs. Stretching out in a great bounce, his chest almost brushing the ground. So he had become very muscular, very strong. He was looking healthy. Okay, in these 2 weeks, he had improved a lot. I carried him back along the passage to the front of the door. The chauffeur was still holding the car door open, and when Tricky saw his mistress, he took off from my arms in a tremendous leap and sailed into Mrs. Pumphrey's lap. So he jumped from Mr. Harriet's arm, and he settled in the lap of Mrs. Pumphrey. Okay, and then what happened? Let us see. She gave a startled ooh and then had to defend herself as he swarmed over her, licking her face and barking. During the excitement, I had the chauffeur to bring out the beds, toys, cushion, coats, and balls, none of which had been used. So he did not use all those luxurious and comfort things for the dog. He made the dog to live a normal life along with other dogs. So all these things, actually all these things, all these comforts and extra food spoiled him. As the car moved away, Mrs. Pumphrey leaned out of the window, tears shone in her eyes. Her lips trembled. Oh, Mr. Harriet, she cried, how can I ever thank you? This is a triumph of surgery. She thought the doctor had made a surgery, and it was a victory of surgery that had recovered Tricky, but she was not knowing the real secret. What the what the doctor had used to cure the dog. Got it, children? So this is all in the story. So over pampering, overfeeding is not or never helpful. It is actually a way to spoil, to ruin